Welcome everyone who is joining this webinar today and to those who are listening later on. My name is Lisa Carlson and I'm the Chief Executive of Canterbury's Business Improvement District. We've been hosting a number of webinars and also sector group meetings throughout lockdown, and now that we've started to reopen and into recovery, and it's been so incredibly helpful to meet together. It's been fantastic actually to see all of you in person since the 15th of June, but really helpful that we could meet like this and hear all of your concerns and ideas. And consistently throughout the last 3 to 4 months, we have been able to feed through your thoughts, your concerns, your ideas, and it is very much making a difference and helping those of us, the BID, Canterbury City Council, Kent County Council, and many others who are making decisions at a local, regional and national level in terms of what kind of support you need. So we're really delighted to be hosting this webinar today, and a very, very warm welcome to Jo Cox-Brown, who is joining us to deliver this session today. Jo will have a presentation and then there'll be plenty of time as well for question and answers, and we can share this presentation with you afterwards and also the recording. So Jo has worked in the nighttime economy for, Jo, I think over 12 years, possibly even longer, and was chief exec of a charity set up for the nighttime economy in Nottingham, and has played a number of roles. Currently, she's a fellow of the Institute of Place Management and also works closely with the Association of Town and City Management on Purple Flag. So things that are really close to our heart here in Canterbury, and to ways in which we're involved as well. So it's brilliant that Jo can be with us today. And Jo, we look forward to hearing from you. We've also have Catherine Herndon, who is Visit Canterbury at Canterbury City Council with us and has been working with businesses across the district, including in the city centre, and Rachel Pillard, who's our marketing and communications manager. So I'm just going to hand over briefly to Rachel. I know we're probably all Zoom and Google Meet experts by now, but Rachel will just talk us through how this session is going to work today, and then straight over to Jo.
Thanks, Lisa. Hello, everybody. Yes, if you could, I'm hoping you all know how to use Zoom these days. We've been at it for quite a few weeks. But if you have any questions for Jo, if you could please put them in the Q&A. The chat function at the bottom of your screen is really just for any technical questions. So any questions for Jo, pop them into the Q&A. Lisa and I will be able, and Catherine will be able to ask those questions to Jo. You're all on silent at the moment, but we will be able to ask all the questions as they come in. Or sorry, we will wait until the end of the presentation. I believe you'll probably have quite a few questions afterwards. But yes, pop them in the Q&A and enjoy the session. Thank you. Jo, I think you're on.
I'm on mute.
Yeah.
That rookie error that we all seem to make every now and then. Hi, my name's Jo Cox-Brown, and like has been said, I have worked in nighttime economy management for over 12 years in a variety of different roles. I wrote the first nighttime economy strategy for Nottingham. I've been the nighttime economy manager for Manchester City Centre, and I've worked with towns and cities across the country, helping them to create safer and more diverse nighttime economies. I've also run a licensed premises for 8 years, and so I know many of the challenges that you are facing. And so this is just a really quick whistle-stop tour of some of the issues and then some of the solutions to those issues. So many of you will have reopened on or after the 4th of July. And this is just really to provide you with an update on emerging issues and to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions, discuss issues and concerns that you may have. We understand that there's so many challenges as you plan to reopen, and more once you start trading. The hospitality sector is driven by sociability, and while social or physical distancing, as I like to call it, is being promoted as an effective block against the virus, it will affect the viability and profitability of your business, even with this 1 metre plus distancing in place. We were just talking about likely to have a catastrophic effect on our industry. So we're expecting 30,000 pubs and restaurants to never reopen and a further similar amount to cease trading. And some of this presentation is really geared towards preventing you from being one of those statistics. It's really essential that you plan and that you work in partnership. And by working in partnership, we mean working with your business improvement district, working with your local council, working with your local police, and that partnership working will be essential to your recovery. Please don't try and struggle on by yourself and accept all of the support that is available to you. You're one of the last sectors to reopen. There's still nightclubs to reopen and theatres to reopen. But as a result of that, the financial challenges that you're facing can seem like a huge mountain, as well as having to deal with staff welfare, customer welfare, safety, hygiene, dealing with consumer confidence and physical distancing and staying on brand and attractive to customers, whilst being more sanitised than normal, whilst adhering to operational requirements and risk assessments, and staff challenges and bringing people back from furlough and staggering breaks. You are facing a huge upward battle, and we want you to know that there are people out there that can help and support you as you face this, so please don't feel like you are on your own. The police initially thought that there was going to be a huge disorder spike when people came out. That didn't really happen, and the reality is that what we're facing is quiet evenings, and we are seeing even during the day that footfall is lower, where footfall's still sitting at around that 40 to 55% mark of its normal footfall. And so the reality is that maybe you're not as busy or you're not seeing as much footfall coming through your businesses as you would have expected to. There are still opportunities for alternative income from digital and online, and what we're recommending to businesses is that you have a blended approach, at least while social distancing is still in place. So if you don't have digital or an online offer, potentially you might want to consider building one, and that can then support the footfall coming through your business. And where it might not have been viable to just operate by itself, it might be more viable now that you're open. We are seeing the predicted rise of local versus city centre visits. So local areas are seeing a much greater footfall, their footfall sitting around 50 to 55% as opposed to city centre, which is sitting at that 40 to 50% mark. And so for those of you who are on the outskirts, potentially you have more of an opportunity. You could also be considering things such as varying your premises layouts, because at the moment it's a very uneven playing field. If you're based in a heritage building, I know that I'm involved in 3 heritage buildings that are now part of leisure and culture in Nottingham. And those 3 buildings are really hard to reopen because they're smaller, they have smaller spaces. Do also then be thinking about practical considerations, so things if you haven't reopened, doing things such as your Legionella check. Stocking, we're seeing from some, or restocking is an issue. So some bars and restaurants are saying that they're struggling to get on-tap products, so beer, cider and keg products, and that is because the brewers only started brewing 2 weeks before we reopened, and it takes 3 weeks in order to get some of those products to shelf. So we are seeing that that is an issue for some of you. Be patient, within the next week or so there should be better stock available to you. Food stock, we're also hearing that that is an issue, again, because many people who would ordinarily provide stock for the hospitality and leisure industry change their pack sizes to suit retail during lockdown and are now having to suddenly rechange it again to stock for hospitality and leisure, and that's taking a bit of time to filter through. So again, some of that patience and the need to potentially change your menus in order to consider that is important. As I've said, you are going to have to consider transforming your business offer moving forward, and that is going to be essential for your survival. It's likely that your cash flow is going to be less in between now and probably this time next year. It will take a bit of time to build, and if you've never done a cash flow before, they're really easy to do. You just need a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet put in this is how much money is coming into my business versus how much money is going out of your business, and then it should highlight areas which could become an issue for you moving forward. So times when you might not be able to pay your staff salary, or times that you might not be able to pay your rent, or times that you might not be able to provide enough funding to support the products that you need in your building. Do consider doing a cash flow, and it will help you, because if you notice those pinch points, then you'll be able to take action earlier rather than getting to that point and then having to panic about it. We understand your operating schedule has to change now, and I will go over that in a little while. But again, it will have to keep changing as and when things change from government recommendations. Many of you will have never had to have done a risk assessment before, but you do have to do one now, and your risk assessment has to be published on your website. So do be considering how you're going to manage those risk assessments, how you're going to train your staff to manage them. I've talked about product availability. Health is an ongoing issue, which I'll come on to in a moment. And do be considering whether or not you can operate viably under government requirements. Now, I've spoken and supported over 6,000 businesses to reopen during this process. And approximately 10 or 20% of them are saying, actually, I cannot viably operate under government requirements, so therefore I'm going to remain shut for as long as I possibly can, because it's going to cost me less. If that's you, there's no shame in that. It's okay to say that actually it's not right for me now. So do be thinking about those timings of reopening, and how you're going to position and market your new business offer, and how you're going to train your staff and your management to ensure that they comply with the new regulations, but also that they are welcoming, they're hospitable, that they're friendly, that they're creating a great environment for people to come to. So an overview of this session is we're going to cover track and trace procedures and some case studies for what that might look like for your business. We're going to cover face coverings and social distancing management, indoor activities, outdoor events, dealing with customer anxiety, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A. So again, if you've got questions, then do just pop them up into the chat box and we will come back to them. So an overview: from the 4th of July, pubs, restaurants, bars can reopen. It is limited to table service with minimal staff and customer contact, and customers will also have to give contact details when they enter, and that needs to be kept for 21 days. People should stay 1 metre plus, and this is creating some confusion because there was lots of celebration going on saying we only have to keep 1 metre apart from each other now. That's not right. So the guidance does say 1 metre plus with risk mitigation. So if you have got people and they're 1 metre, such as your waiting staff or those delivering food or drinks to people, they should be having then protection to cover them. 2 households of any size will not be able to meet in any setting inside or out, will be able to meet in any setting inside or out, and the government doesn't recommend meetings of multiple households indoors because of the risk of infection. Outdoors, you can meet in groups of up to 6, but 2 households can meet regardless of size. And you can have more than 30 people in your venue. So the guidance was a bit confusing, and it said you can't gather it for more than 30 people. That 30 people is guidance on things such as weddings, funerals and events inside your venue. So they just can't be gathered together. And you can stay overnight in self-contained accommodation away from home as long as shared facilities are kept clean. So track and trace. You should advise customers and visitors why you need this information and what you will do with it. And this is a key part of data protection. You should also register yourself on the ICO. So the ICO website will take you through a list of questions. It's £40 to register, and you should keep your ICO certificate to hand. And that means that you're able to process this data. You should take customer details and store them for 21 days, both on booking and on entry. The government guidance was changed on this a couple of weeks ago. So on booking, you just need to take the lead person's contact details and ask them if they have contact details for everybody else on that booking. When people are coming into your venue, if they've not booked beforehand, then again, you just need to take the lead details of the person who's coming in and ask the rest of the party if they have their contact details. If they say no, then you do need to take those contact details from them to ensure that you have the ability to contact everyone who's coming into your premises. You should gather what is reasonable and necessary. So that is a name, address, a phone number and or an email address. And you should gather the date of their visit and if possible, their arrival time and departure time. That will then help the track and tracers if there's an issue of somebody having COVID in your venue or one of your staff contracting it. You could use a variety of methods in order to store this. So apps seem to be the most popular at the moment, but you could do individual name cards that they could put in a basket or a box, books in order for people to sign into, but data protection still remains an important issue and you shouldn't be breaching data protection. By breaching data protection, what I mean is you shouldn't be showing another person's details to another person. So all of those have to be confidential. So if you are using a book, you would have to use a separate page for each person coming into your business. If you are allowing people to use a pen and paper or a book method, then you should ensure that those items are cleaned after each use, because again, they could pass COVID between that person and the next person signing it. The best idea is to use apps. Apps are the most secure, they're fairly free/cheap to use, and so that's what we would recommend. We would also recommend that you should use a booking only system where possible. Now for wet led pubs, that's really difficult for you to do because people are just used to popping in for a drink, or if you're a coffee shop or if you're a McDonald's, for example, those can be much more difficult to manage, and so you will have to consider how you're going to do that. Do make sure that the data is secure and cannot be seen by anybody else. You do need to keep it for 21 days. So that is the full 21 days. So on the 22nd day, you can destroy it. That doesn't mean you can throw it in a bin. If you have been keeping paper records, those have to be shredded or burnt or some other form of destruction. If it is electronic, then again, those are much easier. You just delete them and then delete the cache. We would recommend that you only allow one member of staff in order to keep and manage those records rather than a number of staff trying to manage it. And that's because of the amount of people that can then see that data. Again, for many of you, that might not be feasibly possible. So it could just be one person per shift that should be then seeing that data. The data can only be used for purpose of contact tracing and must not be used for marketing purposes. So this is not a time to start building your marketing files and contact lists. Unfortunately, you can't share it with anybody else as it would be a breach of UK data protection laws. If a customer or visitor informs you that they don't want their details shared for the purpose of NHS track and trace, they can choose to opt out, but best practice would be to refuse them entry. You can decide to let them in if you want, but as a business owner, I wouldn't be happy to let them in, because then if they were the ones to have COVID, it would be very difficult for you then to track and trace and advise the rest of your customers. So it is recommended that you refuse them entry. The accuracy of the information provided is the responsibility of the individual. So if somebody comes in, signs their name as Mickey Mouse and gives their phone number as 111 999, whatever that is, you don't have to verify those individuals' identity. You've just tried your hardest to comply with the legislation and with the guidance. And so you are absolved of that. But do make sure that all your staff understand the law and the processes. Now, there was a case last week where somebody signed in to a bar. The bar staff member took a fancy to the girl who had signed in, and then used her contact details to contact her and ask her out on a date. That's not acceptable. So do tell your staff that that kind of use of the data isn't okay, that they shouldn't be contacting them for any other purpose of track rate. If you do find that staff have done that and are contacting pretty girls or pretty boys that they have been in contact with, then you do and should take disciplinary action against that, because that is a breach of law. So yeah, just be really careful of that. In terms of track and trace for staff, or trace and track, whichever way you want to put it, for staff, the names, you need to keep the names of the staff who work at your premises. You need to keep a contact number and an address for each member of staff. Now, if you're an events company, potentially that's a little bit difficult, or if you have a number of staff coming through from an agency, for example, but you will need to do this for now. You will need to keep the dates and the times that the staff are at work, and we would recommend that you are taking health declarations or temperature checks or temperature checks from all of those staff. So that looks like a health declaration. There's lots of those online, but if not, then I'll happily send you a copy of one. And all it states is, I've not been in contact with anyone who has COVID-19. I don't have any symptoms of COVID-19, and then they sign and date that. Now, you could complement that, and many businesses are, with a temperature check, that they're then noting the temperature of those staff members on that card. Again, those need to be kept for a minimum of 21 days. However, we are seeing from the rest of Europe that there's been an increase in the amount of claims made to businesses because they're not showing due care and protecting their staff. And so we are recommending that you do keep those for a longer period of time in order to prove that you have shown due care in protecting your staff and customers. So what do you do if you get in the unfortunate situation where a customer or staff member confirms that they have a case of COVID-19? As we saw from last weekend and the weekend before, that a number of bars have had to, and restaurants have had to shut down as a result. So one of our clients in the Northeast has had to shut down. Now, they were very lucky because they had followed advice, which was they only had one team member. So they've created teams, and their teams are, Team A always works together on a Saturday, Team B always works together on a Sunday. And so they only had to shut down for one day, clear and clean their venue, and keep that team off for 2 weeks. Now, we have another client in Cornwall who unfortunately didn't follow that guidance, and all of their staff were working on the Saturday that reopened, and as a result they have had to close for 2 weeks and they can't reopen, and that has meant another 2 weeks of very detrimental business performance for them. So in order to make sure that you deal with an outbreak in the best way possible, you need to have performed a risk assessment of how you're going to manage your venue and how you're going to deal with an outbreak. If you haven't performed a risk assessment yet, then the best risk assessment is on the Health and Safety Exec, so hse.co.uk website. Go there, download that risk assessment and use it. You need to make sure that signage is well placed around your venue, and on booking, instructing those who feel unwell or who are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms to stay at home, and that also includes staff. Ensure there's adequate signage around your venue and on booking detailing what to do if a customer falls ill within 7 days of visiting your premises. Advise your staff what to do if they fall ill or someone that they've been in contact falls ill, and ensure all employees monitor their health and inform their line manager immediately if they experience symptoms, however mild. And sick members of staff mustn't come into work and must be sent home immediately if symptoms develop. Regularly review this to ensure it complies with the latest guidance as well, because it is ever changing. So dealing with an outbreak, identify the source. Is it staff or is it customers? Gather the information. So you should be keeping customer and staff records for 21 days as a minimum. This will help to assist the track and trace team. If it is a staff member, then get their name, their contact details of all the staff that have come into contact with that staff member who has COVID-19 and any dates that they work together. If it's customers, then gather the name, the contact details of all the customers who were in the building on the dates the infected customer or staff member or members were in the building. Then you should contact Public Health England. For staff, you should report the suspected outbreak to your local Public Health England protection team. You should also report the suspected outbreak under RIDDOR, and you should provide the above with all of the gathered information from the above, including rotas. You should be keeping your rotas again and making sure that those are stored safely. If it's a customer, then giving the name and contact details of all of the customers who were in the building on the dates the infected customer or staff members were in the building. To assist public health, trace and track, then you should follow the advice of your local public health team. They may ask you to implement control measures. However, those control measures do have to come from your local public health team, because if they don't, then you will not be insured or your insurance won't cover it. So only close your venue if you have written advice from Public Health England forcing you to do so, to make sure that it triggers your insurance policy. Only put your staff who have been in contact with the virus on sick leave for 2 weeks if Public Health England have advised you to do so, and then you can claim under their sick leave for 2 weeks. Do contact HMRC to claim back any of the statutory sick pay. Do deep clean your venue, and that is a thorough deep clean of everything, and you will need to get in a professional company to do that. Do publish the outbreak on your social media and write to, that can be either a letter or an email or a phone call, does also count, to all customers and staff who were in the venue on the identified days. You will then need to work with Public Health England to assist with staff and customer communications, and you will be required to review your risk assessment to see if any further steps could be put in place to prevent a similar incident occurring in the future. Face coverings, so not mandatory, but it will be mandatory to wear a face covering in shops from the 24th of July. We have seen a rise in personal injury claims from across Europe and America from a mixture of staff who feel like they haven't been adequately protected by their employer and that their risk assessments haven't been adequate, and customers who also feel that their venue that they visited didn't take enough precautions in order to protect them. So therefore, perform a risk assessment considering the number of people that they will be in contact with in one day. So for example, if you have a waitress or a bar staff member and they're going to every single table, they're taking an order from that table, the risk is much higher than if you have somebody back of house pot washing. So you might want to consider as part of that risk assessment that because of the volume of people that they're coming into contact with, that they might want to wear some form of face covering. Now, the government says that you don't need to have a clinical grade mask or a clinical grade face cover, but some form of face covering might be a wise idea for those people working in those high footfall areas. When we asked customers, so a Left Lion survey of 6,000 people said 50.3% said staff wearing masks was helpful and 27.2% said it was required. So that gives you an indication of the amount of people that would actually really prefer your staff to be wearing masks, and it would help them to feel safe. Do consult your staff, so ask them, do they want to wear it? And if they say no, then maybe taking a letter from them to say, I don't need to wear a mask, I'm happy to take that risk, and then it signs off your responsibility. However, even in that situation, you should make PPE available. You should train people on how to use it. So the amount of people that I see wearing masks around their forehead, on their chin, covering their nose but not their mouth, or covering their mouth but not their nose. So the virus can get through in any area that you breathe in or out through. So make sure that if they are wearing a mask, that it covers their nose and their mouth at all times, that they shouldn't be touching it If it becomes damp or wet, then they should remove it and replace it with a new one. And so making sure that they are aware of how to use PPE and use it properly. Now, we think gloves give people a false sense of security because you think you're wearing gloves and then you go off and touch lots of things, whereas if you're not wearing gloves, you're much more aware of the things that you're touching. So, for example, if they are touching dirty plates, they should wash their hands after every touch of those dirty plates. In between serving people, if they're handling cash, they should wash their hands after handling cash. And so it's really important that they have good hand washing practices in place. And good hand washing practices look like every time they touch something that could be contaminated, they should wash or sanitize their hands. And then in between times, they should wash it every 15 minutes as a minimum. And again, face coverings aren't mandatory for customers, but it will be mandatory to wear a face covering in shops from the 24th of July. So you might want to consider, again, encouraging customers to wear masks whilst they're not eating or drinking if they're walking around your building. And again, in order to make sure that you're not one of those statistics in a personal injury claim to say that you haven't shown due care in protecting them. You might want to take health declarations on entry to say that I haven't been in contact with anyone who has COVID, or I don't have any symptoms. That could be a tick box on the data form that they fill in. Toilets are a major concern, and they were one of the reasons why the government didn't open the hospitality industry for quite a while. And the reason is that COVID-19 lives in human poo for 33 days after someone has tested negative. So you could go to the toilet and then you flush it, and then there's this thing called a plume, and a plume goes for 6 feet in either direction. And so even if you're clear of COVID-19, you could still pass it on by using the toilet and then this plume that spreads 6 feet. So it would be recommended. I'm looking at his face and it's a face of horror at the thought of this 6 feet plume of poo. I know I've had to do some interesting research over this. So yeah, do think about how you're going to safely manage those toilets. Are you going to ask people to wear face coverings in your toilets? Are you going to allow people in one by one or just in twos? I was with a client yesterday and they're only allowing, they have a sign on the door and it says one in, one out. And so you can use the toilet on your own and then come out, and they have also suggested that you wear face coverings in them. I know there's a hotel or a couple of hotels on here, but do think about your hotel corridors. Hotel corridors are pinch points. They're very rarely wider than 2 meters. And so do consider, if you have hotel guests, asking them to wear masks in your corridors and also in your lifts. So many hotels are putting in place a 2-person maximum in their lifts, and then they're putting in marked social distancing so that then people face the walls back to back in those lifts, and therefore that will reduce the amount of spread. And again, they're encouraging people to wear masks in those lifts. Do also be considering your pinch points around the venue. So those things such as your entrances and your exits where people have to cross over each other, and how you can best manage those. Could you create a separate entrance and an exit so there's a one-way system through your building? In terms of social distancing, as I've said at the beginning, people should stay 1 meter plus. So this isn't a recommendation that they can now sit 1 meter apart from each other. It is only where a distance of 2 meters is not possible. However, if you've got a family group and they've come and there's 6 of them and they're sat around the table, then it's not expected that they would stay 1 meter plus apart from each other. They're living together, they're probably not 1 meter apart in their households, and so that expectation isn't there. However, the following table along should be at a distance of 2 meters. And so do be considering, and that is with people sat on chairs. So for example, if you've got someone and they're sat at a table, and that following table should then be at least 2 meters apart from the back of that chair that is closest to them. Many people are just thinking it's 2 meters between each table, but it's not. It's 2 meters between each group of people who are sat. Now, 2 households of any size will be able to meet in any setting, inside or out, and the government doesn't recommend meetings of multiple households indoors because of the risk of infection. And again, 2 meters should be facilitated where those 2 households are in place. So for example, if you have a booking, you've got 3 people from one household, 4 people from another household. Yes, they can meet together to make a table of 7, but you should be facilitating that 1 meter plus or 2 meters to enable those 2 family groups to sit apart from each other. Outdoors, people can meet in groups of up to 6, but 2 households can meet regardless of size up to 30 people. Not that you're likely to get 2 family groups of 15, unless you're my family from Ireland, and I have a huge family, and my mum has 8 brothers and sisters, so that would be kind of perfectly normal for those kind of sizes of people to be meeting in those environments. You should be facilitating 2 meters. You can have more than 30 people in your venue at any one time. They just can't be gathered together, with the exception of weddings and funerals. But if you are hosting a wedding or a funeral or a wake in your venue, then you should still be facilitating, even if you've got that 30 people together, that no more than 2 people from any household are sat around a table, and you should be facilitating the 2 meter distance, if that makes sense. You should prevent people from grouping, gathering, shouting and dancing. I know it sounds like the most dullest hospitality industry ever, but you should, as from the beginning, and lots of venues found this really difficult on that first weekend that they opened. They found people gathering at their bars, they found people grouping together. It's much easier for you to stop that happening early on than to let it kind of happen, get a bit out of hand and then have to interject. And do train your staff on how to deal with conflict and management of social distancing. It is expected that you as a venue will manage your social distancing and will manage any conflict associated with that. And that's included in your security staff. So do make sure that if you have SIA security staff, that you have asked the security company whether they've performed a risk assessment, whether they've done training on social distancing and managing people. You should have evidence of that. So you should see their risk assessment, their training, to make sure that you're happy with it. And then you just have to give a specific venue training for those security staff. Now, it's much more difficult if you are a security staff member to manage social distancing. So the type of PPE that might be considered appropriate could be a face shield, because they could be asked to search people, for example, and that means getting closer than 1 meter. They could be asked in order to look at somebody's ID, for example, and to get much closer than that 1 meter in order to make sure that they have it. People should be willing to remove their face masks in order to make sure that you can check their ID. So that is expected. And if they don't comply, then the guidance says that you can refuse them. So that is within your power. But yes, do train your staff and other staff, so like security staff, to deal with conflict. In terms of entertainment, the government guidance has stated that entertainment shouldn't be undertaken in a live form. All venues are required to take steps to avoid people needing to unduly raise their voices, refraining from playing music or broadcasts that they may encourage shouting or anything else that makes normal conversation difficult. So discussions have been undertaken with regards to the showing of live sporting events and other broadcasts. And at this time, these aren't banned. However, consideration to risk assessing each event is necessary. So for example, the first weekend that we opened in Nottingham, there was a local derby between Nottingham and Derby. People wanted to show the football. However, a risk assessment proved that they couldn't manage their customers not jumping up and down, causing their voices to be raised against the volume, and therefore it was decided that they wouldn't be able to show that local football. Now, if it was a rubbish football team versus another rubbish football team that you might only get 10 or so people coming to watch it, the reality is you could probably safely manage that. If it's Manchester United versus Liverpool, or I don't know what the local team in Canterbury is, but you might, bit dodgy by the looks on some people's faces, you might decide that actually you can't manage that safely. Now, playing golf, for example, people don't get overly heated at the showing of golf that I've seen, and therefore golf probably is acceptable. Your risk assessment would prove that you could manage that safely. If you've got any further questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them. In terms of indoor games such as pool, snooker and darts should be discouraged as they're not in the spirit of the guidance. The intent of the guidance is to prevent customers walking around indoors. Customers should be seated unless going to the toilet or the bar to make an order or to pay. However, in saying that, some local authorities are allowing pool, snooker and snooker halls to open and for you to play pool, snooker and darts. So again, it really depends where you are. If you do decide that you can manage it safely, and managing it safely might be, I don't know, you've got a pool table in a back room where only 2 people can gather, and you put chairs in there so that when they're not taking a shot that they're seated, and that the pool cues are wiped down after each player, the balls are wiped down after each player, that there's no chalk in there that multiple people can use, then you might decide that actually that is safe. Darts is going to be a little bit more difficult because it does require that people should be standing in order to throw those darts, and so we don't think that darts is appropriate for the moment. However, you could consider indoor games such as I don't know, a pub quiz. A pub quiz would be a perfectly acceptable thing. Bingo would also be perfectly acceptable if you have the right license to enable gambling to happen on your site. So things such as that would be acceptable. In terms of gaming machines can lead to people walking around unnecessarily within the venue, and the COVID guidance aims to prevent this. However, the advice is that do consider placing a stool at the machine so that the customer can remain seated and therefore comply with the guidance. You should supply appropriate cleaning materials to ensure cleaning after use, so whether that be self-cleaning or whether a staff member goes and cleans it. Do consider the location of the machine, as it will cause people to pass closely when visiting the toilet, for example. It should be removed, so it shouldn't be in any corridors or walkways. And gaming machines, don't forget, should be clearly visible from the bar to enable legal age verification checks to be carried out. Outdoor events, this was changed last weekend, which is exciting. So now performing arts can take place outdoors from last weekend with a socially distanced audience present. So you will need to perform a thorough risk assessment before you do any form of outdoor event or activity. You will also need to consider disabled users, and that is inside as well. So what we're seeing is disabled users can create a bit of a problem where people have put in place chairs in a position that doesn't allow someone in a wheelchair to pass within 2 meters. So you do need to consider disabled users, and you do need to make sure that your outdoor or indoor activity is equally accessible to all people. Now, there's 3 groups that are saying that they're really struggling, both indoors and outdoors. The first are blind people who are using guide dogs because their guide dogs haven't been trained to socially distance. So they're just trained to get around the issues. So please be mindful if you have people arriving and you see that they've got a guide dog, go and offer to help them. The second is people in wheelchairs, as I've mentioned, because the chair takes up more space than somebody walking past, and you shouldn't be not facilitating that. So do make sure that you have space that can be accessed by disabled users. And then the third one is those with autism, and those with autism do find it difficult to comply with demands or things that are asked with them, and therefore you should be facilitating their safe use of your building or your outdoor event. If you're holding an outdoor event, you will need to reduce your normal capacity to ensure social distancing can be maintained. Now, Glyndebourne did something this weekend, thought it was marvellous. They had put out deck chairs, they put out these squares on the deck, around the deck chairs to say, this is my space, and then they were doing deck chair service only. A reduction in capacity to ensure social distancing can be maintained, and social interaction should be limited to a group of no more than 2 households, indoors or out, or up to 6 people from different households, so you will need to be checking that. Individual groups shouldn't interact with anyone outside of their group. So say, for example, you've marked out a space, you've got 6 people from a different household in that space, it's all nice and neat and marked out. They shouldn't be interacting with the people who are in the next square from them, who could also be 6 people from a different household. And we have seen that as an issue in certain circumstances. All tickets must be purchased online, and venues are encouraged to move towards e-ticketing for help with track and trace. You should clearly communicate social distancing marking in place. Now, that's not just where people are seated, but that is around things such as toilets, or where there's food, or where there's parking available, in order to facilitate people. And there should be an easy one-way system for people to use. Do you think about increasing your deep cleaning, and that's particularly of things such as toilets? Again, if you're using portaloos, those should be cleaned every 15 minutes. And do make sure that you have hand sanitization in place on the exit and on the entry to any toilets that you have. Do you stagger your entry and exit times to prevent queues forming? No queue should be happening inside a venue, so queuing should always be outside. But if you are doing an outdoor event, you should also try and prevent queues forming. Do ensure you've got the correct license to hold an outdoor event. So have you got a TENS notice or other? Have you informed your local authority and your local police service that you are going to host this event? Are they in agreement that they've read your risk assessment, that they think it's appropriate? And in the case of drive-in performances, only allowing cars to park sufficiently far apart to ensure social distancing is maintained, because what we're seeing in things like drive-in cinemas, drive-in concerts, is even if people are driving in, they're getting out of their cars and sitting on the bonnet or sitting on the floor next to the car, and therefore you need to make sure that there is enough room around those to enable not only parking, but people getting out and setting up a picnic on the outside of those spaces. So it will have to be at least a 2-metre marking around the car. You shouldn't be providing any cloakrooms for people, and you should be providing an in-seat service. So that in-seat service is really important. So that's where you send your staff to the people, take an order, go get the order, come back with it. They shouldn't be out and about milling around, and that also includes for food. So if you have food trucks, for example, normally, then they wouldn't be able to just people mill around and walk up to them. Again, you'd have to be taking orders for those and giving them to people in their seats. Performances should be scheduled to allow sufficient time to undertake deep cleaning before the next audience arrives. And that's particularly important if you are offering things like blankets or chairs for people to sit on, or tables for people to sit around. So you will have to make sure that those can be deep cleaned. Singing and the playing of brass and wind instruments in groups or in front of an audience is limited to professionals only. So you can't have karaoke, for example. I know everyone's sad. But yeah, no karaoke. Performers, conductors and musicians must observe social distancing wherever possible. So if you have a stage, you can't fill that stage with people. They have to be able to socially distance. So you should be marking out those social distancing spaces to make sure that they have their own spaces. And if you have got staff working those events, then do consider face coverings, making sure that there's enough hand washing stations, and managing social distancing. Just coming into the last bit, but dealing with customer anxiety, it's really important that you start to build trust to enable people to come back into your building or to your event or festival or whatever that looks like. And the Left Line survey that I mentioned at the beginning of over 6,000 people who normally go out once a week or more said 76% want to see temperature checks on entry. 59.5 want to see door staff controlling entry at all times, and a 30.5 want to see it some of the time. Now, from door staff, on further questioning, those people indicated it didn't necessarily have to be door staff, but it had to be somebody controlling entry and exit at all times. So they don't want to just be able to wander in, try and find themselves a seat, mill around. They do want that process managed so that they feel safe. 74.6 want to see hand washing or sanitisation on entry, and 77.2 want to see it around the venue. 88.3 want to see visible cleaning of tables, chairs, surfaces and toilets in venues. Now, I've run a venue, as I've said. I'm also involved in a number of venues still, and work with a lot of clients on this. And we've always tried to clean our tables, chairs surreptitiously, so nobody can see us cleaning. That is not the case anymore. You need to make a real theatre of cleaning so that people can see it. 81.7 are saying contactless payments are fine, and 64.4 want to see mobile ordering, and supported by another 23.9 saying it's absolutely necessary. So if you don't have an app in place to enable people to order via their phones and not have to come to a bar or come into contact with somebody, then we would recommend that you start to look at them. There are a variety out there that are really good. So Yoello is a really good one. Be Seated is another really good one that you could look at. And those seem to be the most popular ones from the clients that I'm talking to. In terms of then building trust and expected footfall, the diffusion of innovation model may well help you. So the diffusion of innovation model looks at how the uptake of people, the new brands or new ways of working and moderating their behaviour. So 16% of people are known as innovators and early adopters. Those are the people that came out on that first night, that first weekend, and made sure that they were the first in your venue. The second is this early majority, so this 34%. They're the ones that you're probably seeing coming through the door at the moment. It's 2 weeks later, they're probably feeling a bit braver, and they will start to come through. It's really essential that you gather positive feedback from that group of 16 and this next group of early majority. Use that positive feedback to your advantage. Publish it on social media, shout about it to everybody who comes through your door. Make sure that you are publishing positive experiences. And again, that's really important for your council and business improvement district as well, to capture those positive experiences, to build trust, and in order to gain traction and footfall coming through. Now, if people have a bad experience, then it will impact this late majority. So the next 34 or 16% of the laggards who have indicated they won't come out for, say, a month or longer. So it's really important that that positive feedback is used. And again, the Left Line survey said that having a drink, 34.4 want to go out as soon as possible. And this is from people who normally go out once a week or more. 35.9 want to wait a week or so. And 29.7 will not go out for a month, a few months or longer. So that gives you an indication of the likely build you're likely to see from a footfall perspective. In terms of eating out, 27.5 want to go out as soon as possible to eat out, 38.1 want to wait a week or so, and 34.4 will not go out for a month, a few months or longer. So that gives you an indication of when you're likely to see that build back up to your original footfall. Customers are looking to companies they rely on for guidance and clarity. So again, using those that positive feedback to show that other people rely on you, other people trust you is important. And you can do that through a variety of different ways. So videos, photos, and a narrative to show what steps you're taking or have taken. And that really builds confidence in customers being able to see the processes that you've put in place. Do take the customer on a journey from arrival to departure on your website or on booking, or via a short video. And again, there's some really good free videos out there that you could use. So things like Motion Den, which you can create a video for free on. Do make sure that your risk assessment and your relevant policies are on your website and social media so people can check them and see the processes that you're going through. If you're not open yet, do you think about running a trial with a select few customers and then getting their feedback and then publishing that either as a video or as a case study on your website? And do you think about creating and testing a seamless journey? Ensure you've got a good cancellation and a clear cancellation policy in place, so if someone does need to cancel because they get COVID or they get worried or scared, that they know exactly what to do. And make sure that your marketing is all about building customer confidence and dealing with anxiety, so celebrating all the really good things about your business or your area. There are some things that are accreditation schemes that you can apply to show that you've reached certain standards. So the AA COVID-19 Confident is one, the visitbritain.org is another, the gov.uk one is mandatory, so you do need to print off that top right-hand blue poster. And then there's the food alert if you're a food business that you can apply to too. We were asked a question on tourism, so I've just built that in. But there was a near total shutdown on international tourism to and from the UK, and as of the 3rd of June, Visit Britain expected a decline of 59% in visits, down to 16.8 million, 63% reduction in spend to 10.9 billion. This represents a loss versus the pre-COVID forecast of 25.3 million visits and a £19.7 billion spend. The quarantine period also is putting people off, so for all international arrivals to the UK except from the Republic of Ireland and for those in a short list of exemptions are required to self-isolate for 14 days. So the reality is they're probably not going to come, because if they come they're going to have to self-isolate for 14 days and then go back home again, which wouldn't be the best holiday I think people will have ever been on. Tourism numbers are forecast to gradually rise throughout the remainder of 2020, although it's going to be very likely to be well below normal. So we are relying a bit on the domestic tourism. However, the picture's not looking so rosy there either. So Visit Britain have also run a domestic impact model for 2020. The forecast modelled for each of the 4 journey purposes for overnight tourism, so holidays, business, friends visiting, relatives, etc., and day trips. And that forecasts it's going to be down 48% compared to 2019, so from 75.9 billion, and this comprises 10 billion from overnight tourism, down from 19.5 billion, and 29.1 billion from day trips, down from 56 billion in 2019. So there is quite a significant drop that we're expecting from even domestic tourism. That represents a decline of 48% for both overnights and leisure day trips, through a pattern of recovery could be a little bit different. If we look at business, the majority of businesses aren't allowing overnight travel. So all of the FTSE 100 companies have issued statements to say that they aren't allowing business travel, or they're only allowing it in special circumstances. So that gives you a very good indication of the likely impact it's likely to have on, again, those business travellers who, if you're a hotel, you might likely be seeing coming through Monday to Thursday. Now, that is also based on the fact that we could have a second wave, so that might not be a second wave. And then in early 2021, we're unlikely to be back up to baseline COVID levels as well. So that's kind of probably the midline picture that Visit Britain is showing on domestic tourism. Okay, I'm finished. I'll hand over to question and answers.
Thank you so much, Jo. That was fascinating. I'm still recovering from the poo situation, but I'll try and get over it. I was just thinking, before we move on to questions, I know Catherine from Visit Canterbury has a sentiment tracker, or knows of a sentiment tracker, and I was wondering if Catherine would like to jump in with any more of the visitor information. Catherine, you're on silent.
You think I'd know how this works by now, wouldn't you, really? Yeah, it was just, I think probably what's best is sharing the link afterwards so that people have got it to refer to, because it's a weekly sentiment tracker. There's two that I've seen. There's one by Visit Britain, and they basically measure the domestic market's attempt to take short breaks and holidays in the UK and abroad. So it does have some useful insights on that. So I'll share a link around for that. There's also another one that I found through UK Inbound, which is a tourism membership body that we're a member of, and a lot of other tourism management associations. And they are saying that current sentiment tracker is saying 37% are planning to book a UK holiday by September, and 35% are likely to visit an attraction by the end of August, which is the highest proportion that they've measured since lockdown. So yeah, it's a lot lower, but there's still chance for things to pick up, and that certainly seems to be the intent. So I'll share both those links around.
Brilliant. Thanks, Catherine. Sorry, Lisa, over to you. Would you like to?
Jo, thank you. That was incredibly helpful. There's a lot of information there that we'll want to pull out from the slides and share. But we do have a few questions to go through that have come in. The first one was, can you recommend an easy to use app or any apps for track and trace? You mentioned a few apps for ordering, menu ordering. Are there any apps that you've come across for track and trace gathering?
Yes, I can send a list through for you if you like. There's one called Track and Trace, which seems to be the most popular one. However, yeah, there's a list and I can send them to you if that's easiest, and then you can send them out to people.
Great, we'll definitely do that. There are a few questions that are specific to Canterbury, such as, do we have any information regarding student numbers? I'll come back in a minute to the Canterbury ones. We've covered what we know about tourist numbers, and we'll circulate the tracking information links so we can keep an eye on that. Another question specific to Canterbury is about footfall. I'll come back to that, and also bus services. Another question about, can we join all relevant businesses for a late night event to highlight the safety measures that are in place and improve consumer confidence? So I know that's specific to us, and we are looking at various consumer confidence campaigns, and in fact some are going on at the moment. But I wondered, Jo, if you had any knowledge you could share, either through your work in Nottingham or other things you've heard about consumer confidence campaigns.
Yeah, there's a variety of consumer confidence campaigns that are being performed in different cities. So one is a COVID accreditation, and that is being looked at for Devon and Cornwall, and in Nottingham, and in some other cities where all the areas sign up to this statement that they will do all of these things, and then they can get accredited on a local basis, a bit like a Best Bar None scheme, I suppose, but a shorter version. And then they're promoting that as we're attaining as a city or a town or an area to the highest levels of COVID accreditation. Anyone with this sticker has proven that they have gone above and beyond what is required, and they've met these guidelines. So yes, there's one thing there which is around agreeing as a town or a city that that's what you're going to do. Another area which is Wakefield and West Yorkshire. They are doing consumer confidence campaigns around gathering positive feedback. So they're doing mini videos of people in venues saying, oh, I've been out tonight, I felt really safe. And then they're sharing those on social media widely in order to encourage people to come into the nighttime economy and into venues. I'm just trying to think of any other good ones that I've seen.
Just to go back to the certificate, who, apart from the area saying, right, we're all going to get together and do this, is there something that has to go through government approval in order to say that you've got this accreditation?
No, they're just creating their own accreditation, so their own scheme underneath their business improvement district. So their business improvement districts are facilitating it.
Right, and so they're deciding on what the
what the categories are.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting, because on the one hand, I think that some of this national level accreditation is really important, and these checklists and the risk assessments, but on the other hand, local information is also really crucial. And, you know, looking at the Canterbury district, we've got the 3 main centres, 2 being coastal and then Canterbury city centre, and they're very, you know, very different. But what we're wanting to do, knowing how important domestic is right now, really wanting to reach out to our local community and then building on that. So that's really interesting. Thank you for that. I'm just going to go back and open up the chat again. I think this next question, I think you covered. I'm just going to ask it in case there's any other scenarios we need to pick up on. Can face guards / visors be used by staff instead of masks in any situation? So thinking about shops and you know, where they're going to become mandatory.
Yeah, of course. So face guards, I think, are perfectly acceptable as long as they're worn correctly. So I've seen a number of face guards when I've been in shops of people wearing them kind of out horizontally from their faces. And so they do need to be right down over the face. They do need to cover up to the chin to make sure that you are spit guard protected. And so yes, you could use face guards instead of face masks.
That's really helpful. In fact, we heard initially from Boots during lockdown about how they had brought in the visors because of customer preference. You know, I think you were commenting on that earlier, people being able to communicate, read lips, just hear better, have some sort of facial connection to be able to understand and just communicate in a more effective way. I've also, we've done some tours of various businesses during lockdown, and then right when things started to reopen on the 15th, and absolutely amazing to see the extent to which people are going to make their staff and customers safe. So we've got Claire from McDonald's who's on the call at the moment, and we've been into other places as well. It's about, from what I can see, it's absolutely about safety, but also we've all had to be retrained through all of this, haven't we, about how to shop and how to be inside a premises. And we, you know, our old habits have to change. You know, we still reach our hands out to try and have to hold them back, you know, not to shake people's hands or give them a hug when we haven't seen them in a while, but also noticing how when staff move around. So this is on McDonald's, how they put up the perspex screens, yes, for safety, but also just to make sure you don't accidentally go the wrong way because you're so used to doing it. So all of these things that are just really, you know, really helpful, and we're seeing more and more of that in different premises. It's just, of course, with the social economy, in so much more challenging, I think.
Yeah, it's much more challenging at night as well when people have had a few drinks and they forget, like you say, to socially distance, or their boundaries come down. And also young people in many circumstances just aren't worried about COVID-19 in the same way that those people who are in their 40s and beyond potentially are just more aware of the issues that they're likely to encounter should they get COVID-19. So it's very difficult trying to explain risk when people have very different views of what risk looks like, or forget, because after you've had a few glasses of Prosecco, the view of risk is lowered. So yeah, it is different at night time.
I'm just going to pick up on some of the local questions, but please jump in if there's anything you can comment on, or Catherine as well. Please jump in, because some of this, you know, goes beyond our remit as a business improvement district. So I had a question about returning student numbers. We don't know yet. We're in regular contact with various people across our universities and unions on a weekly basis. I think it was mentioned they are planning to reopen their campuses, and they do expect some students back. But the conversations, not only in Canterbury but elsewhere, it's no one has this crystal ball. But hearing that, you know, what else are freshers going to do? They might want to come back, versus do they feel they'll get their money's worth if they do? I think some of that, certainly in Canterbury, will only become clear through clearing, when we get more of an idea. But through every conversation we have on a weekly basis, we just don't have a sense of the numbers yet. But what the universities are saying is that they will be open. So sorry, that's not the detailed answer just
yet. Do you want me to add in something there? So we're part of the Town and Gown Association, so we work with universities across the country. The Town and Gown Association are indicating that they're hearing there's likely to be a reduced number of students coming to university this year, that they're planning on deferring until next year till they can have the full experience. So at the moment, it seems to indicate that about 25% of students are indicating they're not planning on coming this year, who would ordinarily have chosen to go. About another 25% are holding off to see what happens over the summer, and will make a decision through clearing, like you suggest, rather than accepting spaces. And about 50% then are indicating that it won't impact them at all, that they're planning on going anyway. So if that helps in any way.
Thank you. No, that's so helpful. Thank you. Another question about footfall. So I'm going to try and answer that. Just the caveat that we only have on the high street one footfall counter. So it's really useful for comparing year on year, week on week, weekend to weekend right now, maybe even looking at relative comparisons for times of day, but not in actual numbers, because it's just the one. And then there are also footfall counters across the Whitefriars Shopping Centre, which is our open air shopping centre. So absolutely right that footfall does drop off after 5 p.m, which is something we touched on earlier. In the early days of reopening, so from mid-June onwards, it was really squashed into sort of 10 to 2 p.m, and now that's expanding. So we're seeing, instead of, you know, the 10 to 2 like this, it's more of a 9 to kind of 4, like that. There are some really good commentaries online, really short ones by Springboard, comparing, and also from the Institute of Place Management, and they do share data, but looking at the UK as a whole, looking at different types of towns and cities. So I can share those links again. I think our hope is there is a lot of work that needs to be done and is being done right now to try and facilitate smaller events in the city. And so we have City Feast coming up end of July, first weekend in August, running for 6 weeks. That will be really, really interesting to see how that goes. We know that there's been a lot of care and attention into making sure that it does go well, and there's been risk assessments done. But if we can then see how a smaller event works and what impact that has, then we can look at what other kind of events like that we could have going forward. But you know, the time is now, and also between licensing and planning locally to work out how we can facilitate that.
Can I throw in a question to this? So knowing that we've got City Feast coming up in a couple of weeks, where we have street food vendors providing food for people. Joe, when we were talking about outdoor events, you were saying that food providers can't have a queue. It has to be that people are served directly to their tables. What's the difference between a street food market and a live event where you've got the food vendors there, but on one situation you can go and queue to get the food and the other one you can't?
Yeah, sure. So those queues should be limited to a certain number of people, and you should be able to socially distance in those queues. So what you might need to put in place is that at each vendor you can only have a maximum of 3 people in a queue, and it shouldn't cross over any other vendor. And then those spots should be marked out that people can queue in, and then a poll at the end to say this is the end of the queue. If it's you can't queue past this point, go away and come back again. It depends on how much space you have available to enable you to do that, as to how many people you could have in that queue. They should be managed in some way, shape or form. I suppose you could manage it in a festival environment in that way. It would just be more difficult because you might have 100 people in one location all getting up at once trying to go to the pizza truck or whatever that looked like. Whereas if it's a festival, it's likely to be spread out across a period of time.
Great, thank you.
And then you should also then be providing space for people to go and eat that food in. That might be considered best practice. So you might want to set up tables and chairs where they could take that back rather than milling around, if that's possible.
Okay, no, that's really helpful. And surely that must be, in a way, a similar concept to when daytime markets were allowed to reopen.
Yeah.
So a similar principle, and we've got one every Wednesday and Friday in the top ends of our high street, and also in Herne Bay and Whitstable. Okay. Another question about whether this is specific to Canterbury, increased bus services in and out of Canterbury. I'll have to get back to you on that. There are some plans, although the viability versus social distancing is really tricky. I think what I'll do is ask specifically about when students return and what those plans are. But I can get an update from Matthew Arnold at Stagecoach and come back to you on that. And then taxi safety in Canterbury is key to the evening and nighttime economy. So what measures are in place? I don't know if Catherine has any information on that from Canterbury City Council, but we might have to follow up on what's being done for that. We can also look at what the universities are doing, but I'd probably have to go back to the community safety unit on that one.
Is there anything nationally that, Jo, that you know about in terms of taxis and any restrictions on how they're running?
Yeah, so in some cities what they're doing is they're putting in place taxi marshals to manage queues. So if they don't have them already, then they're bringing them into place. So that again, they're managing the social distancing in queues. In some cities, they've mandated that taxi drivers should wear masks at all times or face coverings, and that anyone getting into it's considered public transport. So you will have to wear a mask getting into it. It depends on whether or not you mandate that taxis are public transport or not. But I know in 30 of the cities we're working with that they've mandated that it is public transport, and it is expected that you would wear a mask in a taxi, and the taxi driver would also wear the mask, and that the cab should be cleaned after each use. So and that hand sanitizer is available in all the taxis as well, so that when you get in you can sanitize your hands, and then once you get out the taxi driver then has to clean it in between use. So it would depend on what your city council are doing along there, working with their licensing team, the taxi licensing team. But we'd recommend that there is some form of conversation had between the council, taxi licensing and businesses and taxi drivers.
I'll look into that. It hasn't come up on the meetings I've been involved with, but I'm sure that it has come up in other conversations, so I can come back to you on taxis and buses. Are there any other questions? Or
well, we've had a comment, and I think this is quite an interesting one for us to discuss. So Purple Flag, and Lisa, I don't know if you want to explain to the listeners about our relationship with Purple Flag, but the question is, could there be an accreditation, a COVID safety accreditation through Purple Flag to be added to the assessment, like a safe ENTE accreditation?
Yeah, so Purple Flag is run by the Association of Town and City Management, and I sit on the board of that, and also we've recently formed a working group on Purple Flag. Of course, Joe has been involved with this for longer than I have, so I'll just let you know what I'm aware of, and Joe, it'd be great to have your input as well. So Purple Flag is an accreditation for places, and it's to do with the safety and vibrancy of our evening and nighttime economy. So really anything that takes place between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. So it is for everyone. We're talking about restaurants and cafes that are open in the evenings, cinemas, theatre, nightclubs, pubs. You know, there's something for everyone in that. And partially it's about making sure we have a good variety, that it's vibrant and that it's safe. And so every other year, usually in normal times, we would have a team come to assess us. We would do a walk around, ensure that they would be able to meet with local partners, so business owners, police, council, street pastors, you know, anyone who's out and about and involved in the evening and nighttime economy. And then on the alternate years, it's a desktop assessment, which, you know, is still a lot of work for us locally. And it's expected and really important that throughout the year, we are meeting regularly with our Purple Flag or evening and nighttime economy group to keep that collaboration and activity going. So we've held that accreditation in Canterbury now. It was initially started by the council and then taken over by the BID. So that's for the last 7 years. The team that is looking at the Purple Flag accreditation is just come off furlough, so be looking at that again for Canterbury for the assessments that were just due to take place. But in the meantime, a huge piece of work has been done about other accreditations that could be part of Purple Flag, including that safety element. And a paper has just come out about that late last week, could have been early this week. So we'll be going through that and seeing how we can bring that into our own local economy. Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add, because I think you've been involved with Purple Flag for longer than I have.
Oh yeah, you did a great job. No, I don't think I've got anything to add to Purple Flag. And I was just going to say that some areas have been developing their own COVID accreditation. We've developed it for a number of areas. I'll happily share what they're doing with the BID team to show them what other areas are doing once we come off this call. But you might want to develop a local, something that meets your local needs, that lies in line with some of the other things other cities are doing.
That would be great. And we'll also pick up, before this started, we were chatting about how, you know, as a BID, we've developed a COVID recovery and transformation plan, which talks about what we're responsible for, but also how we work with other partners, because that collaboration element is so important. But we chatted about really focusing on different sectors throughout that and looking at the evening and nighttime economy specifically, and how you know, we've all been so much focused in crisis mode, and I think we just need to put all of that work that we've been doing in preparation for reopening and recovery down on paper, and just looking, you know, 2 months ahead, 6 months ahead, 9 months ahead, a year ahead, and start to plan more for that. Rachel, I've been just talking. Has there been anything else that's...
No further questions.
Okay.
But I know that Catherine would like to mention one last thing. So hand over to Catherine.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we've been approached by developers for an app called Locale. So essentially it's helping you manage your venue in terms of customer facing, so that they can see the number of people there, what the queue length might be, how busy it is, how empty it is, the sort of safety measures that you've got in place. I don't know much more than that at the moment. We've got a meeting which Lisa's coming to with us just to suss it out, so that if it's going to be of any value. It seems to be free, which makes me worry, but if it is as good as it says, then that's something that could help businesses. So So we'll keep you posted on that.
I can vouch for that app if you want me to. It's a really fantastic app. We've seen a number of bids that we're working with adopt it. It is free of charge for the first 6 months at least. And then it will be a small fee, I think, for businesses who want to be on there. It's a really tiny fee, but yeah, it is free. And it's definitely worth you signing up for it. We're seeing in areas like in the northeast where businesses are signing up for it, it's really helping with footfall and with consumer confidence. And so, yeah, I can vouch for that. I think it would be a good thing for you to look at.
That's useful to know. Thanks, Jo.
My pleasure.
Great. Well, unless there are any more comments or questions that pop up, Rachel and Catherine, thank you very much for organising all this. Jo, thank you so much for your time today. There's going to be quite a lot of follow-up, I think, and it's great, even though we're involved in similar organisations nationally. It's so nice to meet you and to get your input on Canterbury, the city and the wider district. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone today for joining us, and if you're listening later, please feel free to get in touch. You can see on the screen, if you're listening to the recording, that Jo's details are up, and you can get in touch with Canterbury Bid at canterbury.co.uk, and also look for Canterbury City Council or Visit Canterbury. You can just type that into Google. Number of resources out there for you, but if you need some one-to-one support or if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. So thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.